Sobriety Essays number 54, The Third Step in Marriage. There is a day in my life that I am able to use to judge how my life has turned out. It took place about a year before I got sober. It was about 11 o'clock at night on a cool November evening, and I was sitting on a park bench near my house, and I was trying to decide whether I should live or die. At that precise moment, my 16-year-old daughter rode up on her bicycle and said, "Dad, will you please come home? Mom and I are worried about you." I got up to follow the young lady that I loved dearly, and as I did so, a gun fell out of my pocket onto the ground. The look of disbelief in my daughter's face told me that I had just given her an emotional scar to carry the rest of her life. So I know what it is like to be a total failure as a father. I followed her home to a house where I had destroyed the love and trust of a long-term marriage. So I know what it is like to be an absolute failure as a husband. I felt like a total failure as a human being, have no purpose in life, and wondered why I was ever born. I continued to drink for one more year and carried those feelings with me. That is my definition of incomprehensible demoralization. I got sober on April 19th, 1984. I got sober for the right reasons. I got sober for me. It was suggested that I go to 90 meetings in 90 days, and I could not handle that. That's 3 months of going to meetings. So I decided I would go to a meeting today and would not drink today, and I did that 90 times in a row. I think God has a sense of humor. Because my marriage was so bad that I would rather be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous than at home with her, I went to a meeting every day for the first year of sobriety. I really had a tough time that first year, as I did not know how to let go of old ideas. I did not understand the steps. It seemed to me that all the happy people were working the steps. So I just went to meetings and I didn't drink and I was just sober. Yet I was doing something right. I got a sponsor and I called my sponsor. I listened to my sponsor. One day at 5 months sober, he said something to me that has affected every area of my life. Referring to my marriage, he said, "Chuck, you contribute to that marriage to the best of your ability so that if anything should happen, you can walk away with the least amount of guilt and resentment. Guilt and resentment will get you drunk." That word contribute has become a very powerful word in my life. So I started to contribute to my marriage because I wanted to stay sober. I knew the marriage was not going to work, but I wanted to stay sober. I had a change in attitude. I used to do things for my wife to please her, and my attitude change was I started to do things for my wife to please me. I started to help out around the house. I started to pick up after myself. I started to take responsibility for my actions. I remember at 6 months sober, my wife and I passed 20 years of marriage. I asked her if she would like to have an anniversary card or a gift. She looked me right in the eye and said, "Why would you want to celebrate a failure?" My answer to that was to go to a meeting. In fact, I went to a meeting 3 hours before it even started by just sitting in my car waiting for others to show up. I mentioned that I did not understand the steps, and yet I was working in the steps without ever knowing it. I wasn't drinking, I was saying my prayers, even though I didn't have a God of my very own. It was coming home from a beginner's meeting one night at 9 months sober, I had thought go through my mind, and that thought was that tomorrow is none of my business, that tomorrow belongs to God. I just turned my tomorrows over to the care of God, and I found a freedom that I never knew before. It was an attitude change or a spiritual experience or whatever you want to call it. It was freedom, like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Tomorrows can be 5 minutes from now or 5 days from now. I did not realize that I was working the third step. I made a decision. It was 2 weeks later, and I was coming home from that same beginner's meeting, and I had another thought go through my mind. That marriage of mine was either going to work or it wasn't going to work, and it was God's business, not mine. I could do what my sponsor had suggested, and that was I could contribute to that marriage. and yet how it turned out was God's business, not mine. I did not realize I was doing or working step 3. I made a decision and took the action. It still amazes me. I lost all fear of when we would get a divorce. During the first year of just being sober, there were a couple other things that God had going that I did not recognize. One, when I got sober, my wife called a friend who was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. This lady came over with a big book and tried to explain to the non-alcoholic about AA. One of the things she left my wife with were these words: don't divorce him for 1 year. Maybe, just maybe, something will happen. Great words. Second, my wife would go with me to Saturday night speaker meetings. She heard the Serenity Prayer for the very first time and loved it. She got to know other members of AA and she heard their stories. I will close with this. After 11.5 months of sobriety, my marriage changed. I mean, it just changed. On Wednesday, the marriage was not working, and on Thursday it was. I knew it. I felt it. I recognized immediately that it had changed. The anger was gone. The past was let go of. Today was our day, and we wanted no other. At about 15 months sober, my wife and I were coming home from the same speaker meeting, and she turned to me and said, "The foundation upon which our marriage was built lasted as long as it was supposed to last, and then we went out and built a new one." I was in tears after listening to that. After 5 years of sobriety, my wife and I celebrated 25 years of marriage. She wanted to go out and buy brand new wedding rings, and which we did. We renewed our wedding vows on a cruise. This is what she wanted to do. This past April, I celebrated 22 years of sobriety, and last October the 10th, my wife and I celebrated 41 years of marriage. One of the ongoing miracles is that sometimes in the middle of the night we'll wake up to the fact that we're holding hands. Remember that young daughter that found me on the park bench? 57 days after I got sober, she joined Alcoholics Anonymous on June 16, 2006. She will celebrate 22 years of sobriety on the 16th of June. That is the third step, working in my life. Chuck H.